we would hear this radio go off 10, 20 times a day, usually the same thing. This is paramedic 23 coming in with a 54-year-old male, chest pain. His blood pressure is 120/80. His pulse is 97. We have him on the monitor. We have an IV, and we'll be there in 15 minutes. This time it was different. There's no monitor. There's no IV. There's no pulse. There's no blood pressure recorded. See, the thing is, it wasn't EMS calling in. It was the Secret Service. President Ronald Reagan had just been shot at Washington Hilton. He'd be arriving at George Washington University Hospital's emergency room in 6 minutes. I know the story because I'm a physician, emergency physician. I did my medical training at George Washington University Hospital. And the two physicians that were waiting there for his arrival, Rob Shesher, junior faculty emergency physician, was on one side of the trauma bed. The other side was David Gans, an intern in surgery less than 1 year out of medical school. In those 6 minutes, they cleared out the emergency room. President Reagan was brought in rapidly on a stretcher. They met him out in there at Washington Circle. And they didn't need all that information to know how rough things were for President Reagan. President Reagan was ashy. He was gray, diaphoretic, sweat beading on his forehead. He was going to die if something wasn't done too quickly. Yes, it would have been nice. This is the president, but we need the head of cardiothoracic surgery to come down and see him. We need to have a CAT scan of the chest. We need a chest X-ray. We need all this. Well, there wasn't time for all these things, as Dr. Gans and Dr. Shesher told me when I did my training. They needed to make a decision, and they did what needed to be done. President Reagan actually got shot underneath the arm in the armpit. He basically, his good lung was being forced down by a bad lung. It was bleeding, and he was going to die shortly. So they put a tube in his chest about the size of your thumb and re-expanded that lung without all the information that perhaps many people would like to have. You know what? They saved his life. And you can imagine what, not just our country, but the world would be like today if they had not done what they need to do. I think that Berlin Wall probably would still be there. Amen. Amen. For this race, you don't need all the information to make the right decision. I'm not the status quo candidate. I'm not the establishment candidate. If you're satisfied with the way our country is going, then you don't need me. If you're deeply dissatisfied with where things are going, then I ask you to give me 3 or 4 minutes of your time. Those are Peter Pinkford minutes based on your age. But a few minutes of your time, I'll tell you what I'll do differently. What I'll do is bring 3 very special, unique principles to Congress. The first principle is integrity always. As a physician, I'm called upon to exercise integrity always. And I can tell you, sometimes that can be tough. That was the case when they brought Adam in the emergency room. Actually, Adam came in on his own. He's a 43-year-old guy, but having kind of this vague abdominal pain for months. Wanted to find out what was wrong. When I looked at Adam, you could tell something was wrong because his eyes were yellow. So I spoke with him, did a history, a physical exam, some lab work, did a CT scan. And Adam had a mass at the head of his pancreatic cancer. And I've been practicing as a physician 21 years now, almost 22. And these are things which, even doing it once, you wish you never had to do it. I have to do it far too often. And frankly, if I practice as a physician, as many members of Congress do practice in terms of addressing difficult problems, I would have walked out of the room, I would have passed out to the next shift coming on, I would not have faced it. That wouldn't make the problem go away. Frankly, that's not why I was there. I was there to deal with these issues, and that's why people came to me and addressed them. So yes, I told Adam what was wrong, and we didn't stop there. I told him he had pancreatic cancer. You can imagine how devastating that was. But then we put him in touch with a biliary surgeon that night and opened up that bile duct so he was no longer jaundiced. We admitted him to the oncology service of the hospital. You know what? That was 8 years ago. Adam did everything he had to do, and he's now 8 years cancer.
Oh my God.
The doctor-patient relationship. I'll never ignore America's problems because of political expediency. I will tell you the challenges, the problems that we face, so we can deal with the underlying issues and apply permanent solutions. The second principle I'll bring with me to Congress is fiscal responsibility. We must downsize government, reduce the deficit, start funding the government. The federal deficit right now is the federal debt at $15 trillion. Just to give you a sense of what that is. Everybody in our nation who's working, if they spent, basically the entire year they worked all year, they did not eat, they fasted for a year, they did not pay for any housing or clothing, that would be enough to just start paying down most of the debt. That's how bad it is. As Lincoln said, you cannot escape the responsibilities of tomorrow by evading them today. We must face these challenges. And it's interesting, Alan Blinder, who's an economist with Princeton, prior to the Federal Reserve, pointed out in January in the Wall Street Journal that the #1 cause of the future federal debt, that red that goes to the ceiling, it's not submarines, it's not Social Security, it's not bridges and roads, it's actually health care. So I feel that I have the background as a physician to really understand what works and what does not work in our healthcare system. And frankly, folks, if we don't get that done right, not just healthcare, but also our federal deficit, we're in deep, deep trouble. The third principle I'll bring to Congress is America first. I'm fed up with the antics in Washington, D.C. that will never be tolerated in the private sector at all. But certainly, function that they brought down in the emergency room. Ellen's college-age student had been, we don't know if she was in the crosswalk at the right time or if she was the right time to stop watching, but she was hit by a bus. EMS got there, she was underneath the bus. My job as a physician in the emergency room is to coordinate the care of the other physicians. So when Ellen came in, she had had a bad head injury, abdominal trauma, broken legs. Yes, I would like to have all the physicians I work with always be happy and pleased, but my principal responsibility is to the patient first. What's in his or her first interest? And yes, people want to get CT scans of the head, they want to find out what's going in the belly, they want to get all the x-rays of the legs for Ellen to find out before she moves anywhere. Ellen would have been dead. So sometimes I have to take some people off. I said, no, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a CAT scan of her head, because basically if you bleed in your brain, there's not much left. She went to the OR and did exploratory surgery, and they did all the x-rays there, and we saved her life. And just as in the emergency room, my first priority as a patient, as your congressman, my first priority will be the country. I realize that there will be times when I will not agree with my colleagues on every issue, but I will always work to find common ground, searching for policy that advances our country. In closing, I'd like to just remind, we're all Republicans here, but I'd like to emphasize why, at least for me, I'm not a Republican because I'm not a Democrat. I look at people like Lincoln, I look at people like Reagan, people with principles. They have principles that rose above their individual interests. And they're actually principles that are the reason why we are that light, that beacon on the hill for the rest of the world. And that is what drives me. These individuals were driven by principles of integrity, responsibility, and country first. That is what I work for in Washington, D.C. I ask you to jot down Jotte, J-O-T-T-E, for Congress. In closing, some of you may have gotten a brochure that I have. We were doing a little, and I see you bring this up. I was in Washington, D.C. earlier this week, and sometimes I get kind of drained by things. I'm still a practicing emergency physician. Whenever I get drained, I go to our nation's temple, the Temple of Freedom, the Lincoln Memorial. Who here has been there before? It's amazing. Usually I go there at nighttime when the city is quiet, when the lights are muted. This last Wednesday, I was there Wednesday morning, and it was in the early morning, when Lincoln's features and face were lit by the rising sun. And to his right, you could see the Gettysburg Address. And to be honest, folks, that's why we are all here. That last line of the Gettysburg Address, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish. That's our job tonight. That's our job. Everything, independent of any individual candidate, any individual race, or any individual issue. This is your collective responsibility.